comic book junkies? It's the Frog Queen here, and today I'm bringing you a recent interview I've done with Peter Milligan. Today we're talking about Legion in particular, the new Marvel comic. The character Legion is David Haller, which you probably know if you've seen the new television series. Is based on a Chris Claremont character that was made during the 1980s by Chris Claremont. So this is a brand new series written by the wonderful Peter Milligan, and we are going to discuss everything Legion today.
Oh, we'll jump right into the interview questions. Because...
By the way, if you hear a whining noise in the background, I have some workers downstairs working on my downstairs room, and they are kind of drilling tiles. So there's this hideous kind of dentist noise in the background.
That's got to be difficult to work around.
Can you hear it?
Not really. No.
Oh,
it's
okay,
very
okay.
faint. It's very faint, but I'm sure it's very loud to you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. What can you do?
So I got my copy of Legion. I loved it. But I have a bunch of questions, of course.
Good. This is why I'm here.
So I was wondering first if you could just tell me like how you came to write this Legion story. How did this when did you start writing it? Can you tell me kind of how it got conceptualized? And
yeah, Marvel got in touch with me. Darren Shan got in touch with me. I think Axel Alonso, before he left Marvel, got in touch with me. Axel and me go back quite a while, and Axel kind of got in touch with me and Darren. I think they saw that Legion was going to be weird, and maybe they saw I was the go-to guy for weird stuff, shade, for and actually I'm interested in weird stuff. I keep saying I like weird with a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, do you have any ideas? And he was an interesting character, I thought. But I was interested not only in going inside someone's head and that landscape where you can really explore not just psychologists, but also dreams, nightmares, in a very kind of expressionistic kind of way, which is what I've been trying to do. I was also not interested only in the character of Legion. I was interested in introducing a different kind of character that interests me, namely the Hannah Jones. And the story is called Legion, but it's as much about her as it is about this guy, David Haller, this lunatic David Haller. We have someone who's ostensibly her job is to deal with people with psychological issues, and she's known as the psychologist to the stars. She deals with lots of celebrities, but she's come up from kind of like a working class environment back in London. I'm quite interested in those kind of characters who change themselves to, if you like, metamorphose themselves. So that kind of change and that kind of chameleon kind of characters that can kind of move from one environment to another. They kind of interest me.
Mm-hmm.
And so with her, it really is, even though the story is ostensibly about her trying to find out that these demons that are tormenting, these traumas that are tormenting David Haller, and that is what the story is about, en route, she will have to face her own demons.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Yeah,
Really long. I probably answered about 4 questions that you had no intention of asking them.
No, it's great. Like I wanted to know. Like actually, it was one of my next questions was, how did you develop Legion? And actually, I was interested in kind of knowing, like, of course, my viewers may not know, but Legion was created by Chris Claremont in '85. And he first showed up in New Mutants. Of course, everybody seems to first show up in New Mutants when you go back and look at some of these characters. But I was wondering if you had cultivated him completely on your own, or if you used any of that prior influence from Chris Claremont and other people who have written about Legion over the years.
I tried to adopt a kind of Legion that would. I mean, I know there's been the TV show that a lot of people might be aware of. There's the Chris Claremont, and there's other people like Spurrier. I think I did a good shot. there's a number of people that have written their versions of Legion, and I figured there was some kind of default mode David Haller Legion that has the highlights, the main aspects of this character that we'd all understand. This person who is basically a decent person, I think. He's not a supervillain, though I think he has, his actions suggest he has supervillain-esque traits. I think it's only because he's so disturbed. I don't think he ever sets out knowingly to destroy the universe, or even take over the universe. I think he has a hard enough time trying to take over his own head, and I think that's what this story is about. It's about someone who's it's about one of his alternate personalities. I mean, it's very interesting in a subject matter what he has. But I was interested in looking at. I know kind of I didn't know much about Legion. I mean, and you know, then I heard about this person with lots of different personalities, a lot of alternative personalities. I thought that's really interesting. That's really interesting. And then you kind of find out about who some of these personalities are. You think, well, I want my own ones. You know, where I don't want to do that. And I think that we can still explore the same territory, but without having to kind of like get into too much continuity. It's a recognisable David Haller, but I wanted to kind of explore some of the kind of personalities that I think might be created by this young troubled man. And the gist of the story is that there is this, if you like, this uber personality, this personality called Lord Trauma, which is all these people are aspects of David, but this particular kind of aspect of David called Lord Trauma wants to take over the entire show, and that's how the story begins. There's this uber vicious aspect of David Haller who wants to take him over. And I figured that in some way, I mean, it's always been the internal conflict of David Haller. I mean, he's got all these amazing powers, but he's not a superhero because he's not, you know, because he just doesn't do good stuff all the time. But nor is he a supervillain. So I figured that means that there must be some kind of a conflict between all this stuff that normally in comic book logic. I mean, it's a logic that doesn't exist outside the world of comic books, but within this world of this logic, he should be either good or villainous. And he ain't either.
Yeah. He's described often as an anti-hero, but I don't even think he's an anti-hero because he's just so he's incapable of doing anything himself, like you said, because of his multiple personalities. So it's like calling him an anti-hero doesn't even seem to fit as a good description for him to me.
No, that's just someone who knows he's not a hero. He must be something. He's not an anti-hero. An anti-hero has heroic qualities. And David doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's what's interesting about him.
It makes him such an odd character in the superhero world, for sure.
Yeah, which obviously, as you can understand, knowing a bit of our work, that immediately piqued my interest. You know, I'm interested in the oddness of life. I mean, a lot of for all of its kind of like ostensible strangeness, a lot of our comic books is very conservative. Just generally, what is deemed good, what is deemed bad. Well, obviously, destroying the universe is bad in anyone's language, but it's just, and I think that David Haller's quite an interesting character because he doesn't easily fall into a category. And I think comic books like characters and situations that easily fall into certain categories. So I think for that, there's a kind of subtlety or a kind of ambiguity to his character, which potentially makes for an interesting story.
Yeah, one thing I did notice about your Legion is he does feel very innocent, you know, despite having this tyrannical, you know, personality inside him with all these other conflicting personalities. Himself, or whatever is the true David. I don't know if you can even say there's a true David, but, you know, he does feel much more innocent and kind of childlike.
I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what I wanted, because who is the real David? And I think that is, if you like, all these characters, I guess all of us, we have a central question that remains to be answered. And with him is, who is he really? Who is he? Who is David Heller? I mean, he's got these different facets, but what is the whole? What is the, I mean, and I think that, and I guess also I wanted to see him as not a victim of this stuff, because this stuff makes him what he is. And I'm quite interested because I do a bit of the epilepsy charity work, because I live with that particular thing. And there's quite a lot of people who say are kind of like a kind of a cliched kind of response is often, I don't want to make it define me. But often it does define their lives. It might not define who they are as a person, but it often does define the kind of life they lead. I kind of I wanted David to have that kind of sensitivity that, well, he might not be with these other characters, but it sure as hell does affect his life. It sure as hell makes a difference to his life, because you can't lead a normal life. You can't decide what he's going to be if you didn't know who he's going to be. And I figured that's an interesting, for someone who's in characters side of the mental universe, that's an interesting kind of area for me to explore.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. Because, like, who is he going to be each moment to moment, right?
And what would that do to you? I mean, I think that you either become a villain, are you mad and do terrible things and try to almost expunge these terrible thoughts and terrible people that way by giving in to them, or you do might adopt a kind of innocence, and you adopt a kind of I am nothing.
Yeah, and he really does feel kind of like that. Like he just feels like he's just dealing all the time, right? So how can he ever cultivate himself, really?
I was talking to one woman in the epilepsy support group, and she was talking about her life, and I wanted to say what her name is, but about her life, and because of her medication, she wasn't quite sure whether her symptoms were being caused by all the seizures she had. For example, her memory was often a bit screwed up, or what was their epilepsy medication she had to take. And sometimes even the doctors don't know quite what is causing some of these symptoms. Is it the medication, or is it the symptoms themselves? And someone asked her, how do you live? And she said, I don't live, I survive. And I thought, fucking hell, this is all kind of like, what a terrible way to have a life. In some ways, that's what David Hammett does. I think he just survives. There's moments of clarity. There's moments when he thinks it's really him, and then this other fucking personality pops out, or kind of like there's somebody next to him talking to him, or somebody wants him to do this.
And it's interesting because David is actually trying to do something good in this issue. Like he's actually trying to reach out and help the therapist.
Yes, he wants
kind
to help so that the therapist can help him.
Yeah,
so there's a kind of self-centered quality. But you're right. He's not trying to hurt the therapist, and he does save the therapist. He saves the therapist, then immediately says, "Help me."
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's okay. It could be worse, and I think that Dark Side or whoever probably wouldn't have helped the therapist. Probably would have just watched her die.
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe my example is wrong.
I don't know. I can't say. He's been written a few different ways, and I haven't actually watched the television series. I don't watch TV very often. I don't have time.
I don't watch much of it, but the first episode was good.
Good.
It had a nice kind of a psychologically jarring quality, and it plays around with reality. Yeah, I think of most of the TV makes of comic books, which they tend to be execrable and unwatchable.
Yes.
I found that this was quite an interesting take on it.
Oh, okay. And I'll have to look it up because we don't have cable. We have like Netflix and Crave TV, like streamable things. So I'm sure it's on one of those random stream things.
Is that because where you live?
It's because here cable TV is just outrageously overpriced.
Huh?
It's like something like cable TV here is like digital or satellite, and
Are you living on the moon or something?
no, it's just the way that the local companies have gone. Like we got
Okay.
rid of, like, you can't put up a TV antenna anymore and get a signal. You just can't do that here.
Why?
They got rid of it. They
Is that
literally
the beauty of
stopped broadcasting
competition?
that way.
Is that the beauty of competition?
I don't know.
Where do you live? You live in Canada, don't you?
Yep.
Scotia?
Yeah, in Halifax. So I'm in the provincial capital.
Oh, wow. Is that quite big?
Not really. I mean, it's large for my area. It's the biggest city within like 7 hours, 6 hours, I guess. But it's not like as big as Ontario cities, for instance. So,
Okay.
but I like it. It's good. It's just weird. It's a little bit different than the rest of Canada.
Okay.
But anyway, so that for that reason, I have not seen Legion. And then I was kind of like, do I even want to watch this? Like I tried to watch a couple other the Marvel shows, and I couldn't get through them. They were so dull, and I hated the cast choices. And I was just like, I'm always very, do I want to try and read, or do I want to try and watch this television show? Is it worth my time?
Read all of our Legion first, and then to the first one, because there's differences but similarities, I think. But I mean, I didn't try to place this story in the world of the TV, nor in the world of Chris Claremont exactly.
Okay.
So I think you'll agree that it is recognisably David Haller. The very concept of David Haller is, if you like, a fugitive concept.
Yeah, he does always seem like he's on the run.
On the run psychologically as well.
I actually wanted to ask you too about the Lord Trauma. Was it Lord Trauma? How is this the right picture? This is not the right one. Looking for here it is. If you can see when he's talking on the television, do you see that?
Well, yeah. This is the way of Lord Trauma was manifesting mysteriously in the physical corporeal world.
Okay.
The television that was not the television as such. That's the monitor.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
On which the neurologist can see David Haller's brainwaves. So I like the idea of this pictorial representation of what's going on inside David Haller's brain suddenly becomes metaphorical or a real representation of the person who's inside his brain.
And is there a limit to Lord Trauma's power? Like, because he can manifest already outside in the physical world.
Well, but only partially. I mean, remember the limit. I think the limit of his power, which we will discover, I think is linked to David Haller.
Okay.
I mean, when all's said and done, he's an aspect of David Haller. One could argue that if there is a Lord Trauma, there's an argument that there's a part of David Haller, albeit unconscious, who may need, want, or have felt compelled to create this character.
Okay.
It's often how it works with these multiple personalities. So it's not quite called that anymore. It's called DID, dissociative identity disorder.
I love how the therapist corrects the journalist on that.
Hey, look, I did my research, and I'm going to get it in there in the first episode.
It's so good, though. I actually know one of my friends has several personalities. Yeah, and it's
how does that manifest itself?
It's really, honestly, quite bizarre to deal with. But when it happens, and it has happened when we've hung out, I've met her other personalities.
Oh yeah.
She doesn't work. She can't because one of her personalities is completely dysfunctional. So And for me, it's very incredulous. Like you do feel like this isn't real. You feel like someone's putting it on. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
was going to say, is a small part of you thinking she's faking it?
Half the time you do feel like that because you feel ridiculous. Because all of a sudden you're talking to a small child,
Oh,
you
really?
know? Yeah. And
Oh.
like her
You have to
voice
stop yourself
completely
just being
changes.
really fascinated rather than really sympathetic.
Yeah, and I mean I think it's a lot for her to deal with. She has to deal with a lot of consequences of
Oh,
this.
really? You surprised me.
Yeah.
It sounds, but no, because I have a neurological thing, I mean, I guess
Mhm.
I have an interest in other neurological things. But
Mhm.
what sounds really difficult about that is I was talking to a woman yesterday who recently been diagnosed with epilepsy, but her epilepsy manifests itself in strange ways. She just talks nonsense. She has these absences where she doesn't roll around the floor with that classic epilepsy kind of look.
Mhm.
She doesn't even know she's having it. She'll just start talking nonsense for a
Mhm.
number of minutes. So if she's on the street, people just think she's a lunatic.
Right.
and and we were telling her we were giving her kind of uh, strategies to deal with that. For example, maybe to wear a kind of medi badge or something that explains her condition.
Mhm.
But the more you get into the stuff that the brain can do, I mean, the more outlandishly strange it seemed. And like, but your friend, I mean, look, I mean, I think what's happening to your friend? It sounds really terrible. I did a lot of research, and it sounds such a difficult one. I guess I wanted, even though this is a comic book and this is David
Mhm.
Haller, this is Legion, I didn't want it to suddenly turn into a Bergman kind of movie. Yeah,
That would be really easy to do,
yeah.
actually.
How terrible would that be? You know? um, uh, yeah, right. Um, but I wanted there to be a heart. But this guy is kind of he is an innocent because he is an innocent in the strictest form of the word, which means that he is not in control of these
Mhm.
things that happen to him, or not consciously in control. And I guess that is Hannah's job, try to give him a bit of control back. Well, she won't be able to cure him, but I think that
Mhm.
her aim is more specific. Is just to stop this really dark side of him taking over. So, for example, your friend who has these number of different personalities. I mean, I'm sure that there is one of these personalities you've met, and you think, "Fuck, if that was the one that was kind of the default mode, it would be really bad for her."
Yes, yeah, definitely. Um, because I think the child personality is the worst one, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because when it comes out, her voice changes, and because she could be doing something very adult and then become very childish, and that's sort of difficult to deal with. Because
Do you
there's
know
lots of
your
situations where children are not appropriate, right?
Yeah. Um, do you know whether your friend had some traumatic event in the past?
I'm sure there was, but it's nothing I've probed about. I always leave people alone. Like if they want to tell me that, they'll tell me.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to ask, you know.
That's my policy. Well, we know with David Hallard, obviously it seems to be demeaning to your friend's real problems, but David Hallard
Mhm.
had this in his history. He had this traumatic event in the past. Now, I
Mhm.
think that, look, I think that people that know the story of David Hallard and Legion know about the explosion. Now, I must admit, I thought that's a really confusing old bit of history there. All
It
confusing, all that the terrorist, the Paris. I alluded to it slightly in the first episode with the kind of little Eiffel Towers bent, but I didn't want to get into that too much because it's almost like this Pandora's box that once you open, you kind of have to explain it all. And the first 3 episodes will be about explaining the backstory.
Mhm.
I think you could I think you could come to this story this is just a mutant mad person with
Mhm.
personalities. And I think that it's kind of enough.
I agree. Yeah. I don't think you need to go flashback for, doing a flashback episode or you know what I mean? I don't really think that's
The comics
required
that they might
here.
not have read anyway. I know
Mhm.
I think that's one of the problems of some comic books. we've been doing it for so long now, and look, some of these characters have been around for so long, written by so many people with slightly different ideas, and it's kind of like they have this strange. Now, I mean, it didn't have to be. I think that there's a way of just drawing out the quintessential part of that character, and just running with that, rather than this need to bring people up to speed with everything that's happened. And I think that's death. I find it completely death.
Yeah.
And that happens, I'm just off.
It's boring, and for one, you kind of like having that mystery there because it does encourage people to go back if they want to learn that history, to go back and read more about that character so they get to discover other books. So why bother go and explain and rehash something that's already happened in another book?
I think that's true. I think that if the character feels psychologically valid or psychologically true now, I think that we get that something happened in the past. That's kind of enough.
I agree, yeah. And I don't want to reread that story, his origin story. I can, but, I don't want to reread it in another book.
Don't. Trust me.
No. Don't.
I'm sure it's great, but I didn't want to read through every single Legion story. I think I read through enough that I was but I chose which ones I wanted to read because I wanted, obviously, one has to know enough about the character.
Right.
But it's the character. And I think that, but people change. And like you and I change. Even what's interesting, I think, a lot about this is sort of spectrum. What's interesting about a lot of these neurological conditions is that there's an extreme version, I think, of what happens to all of us anyway. And I think that we are as extreme multiple personalities as someone with dissociative identity disorder, but we all are to some degree more than one person.
Right.
Think. And perhaps adopt different personas. I know this is different, and I'm sure it's missing the point. But I think it's very hard to say what person we are exactly. I don't know about you, but sometimes you find yourself a slightly different person in a slightly different situation with different people. And I think that's really what it is to be human. I'm studying and learning German at the moment.
Ooh.
And I have a tutor from Germany, which is and Skype is so amazing for learning a language because as you're talking to the person, like the words you're getting wrong or the words that she wants you to know, she can type up and you're seeing down the side of the screen, and she can send you a link that you can get some questions we can go through together.
Oh, that's cool.
It's just amazing.
I should do that for Japanese. I've been wanting to. Well, I've always been in love with Japanese culture, of course, but I know quite a bit of spoken Japanese, but I can't read it at all. So I'd love to learn to read it. And there's programs and things. It's more of a time issue for me, but
yes, I think it's a good. For me, I think it's good. It's a good way of using a different part of your brain, which is really different from most of the time I'm kind of thinking about stories, scribbling, or even when I'm reading books. I read kind of loads and loads of books. Part of your mind is always thinking, is there anything I could steal and or be influenced by, or quote. But there's always a part of your mind that is the person that's kind of looking at, And I think there was some British author who used to scribble on the margins of the novels he was reading, which I think it was GES, good enough to steal.
Oh.
I think it's a particularly kind of good bit. And he was just, I think there's some famous British author.
Who said that? There's I can't remember the quote, but the quote basically ends with that good artists imitate, really good artists steal, or something like that. I can't remember.
I think that's Picasso.
Was it? Okay. I couldn't remember, but I still love that because I mean, for a certain extent, for me, it's always been very, very true. You try and imitate other people, but then some things you can kind of directly rip off without actually stealing it.
Being influenced by, I think, and perhaps then moving on to the next stage with. rather than just passing off as your own, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, precisely. I wanted to ask you because I didn't ask you, and it was supposed to be the first question I was supposed to ask, which was, how long is this Legion intended to be? Is it an ongoing?
No, it's a miniseries.
Okay.
Then we'll see how it goes. I kind of like miniseries because it's kind of, I mean, because you just think of a story, it's finite. I often like thinking in terms of a finite story. What I mean, what I'm doing.
Oh, you're breaking up. Just 1 second here. Could you repeat that part?
Hello.
It broke up on
Yeah,
me.
and what I'm doing up at Valiant, you know, Britannia.
Yes.
Which is about. I mean, I like the way that works. It's a 4-episode miniseries, but a number of them. I did one, and that went down really well, so I did another one. So it's transpired as a kind of really slow, ongoing, but it never began life as an ongoing. But we're doing it as and when I have another story I want to tell. And I quite like that arrangement. So for now, this is a 5-part miniseries, but I guess the nature of all these things will then sit back and talk about how it went and what we want to do with it.
Right. And is that how you kind of did X-Statix, or was X-Statix and X-Force an ongoing? Because I don't remember.
It was, yeah. They may have been slightly before your time.
Well, I mean, I have it all.
Yeah, you really should read it.
Oh, I have.
I think you would kind of love it.
I do love it.
Sorry?
I do love it. I wish it would come back.
It started off me kind of writing X-Force, which I don't know. I think Cannonball and some of those characters, which I couldn't really relate to very well. So in the time-honored fashion of comic books, I killed them off and, really quickly. And the story then became obviously a sort of postmodern kind of thing. And I wanted to change its name, but because we were dealing with a kind of a postmodern kind of a take on comics, they changed their name within the story, within the framework of the story. So they themselves changed their name, and I think like a pop band changed their name, or you know. So yeah, so that was always viewed as an ongoing. And I think it lasted it lasted a bit.
Well, the omnibus is like this thick.
Yeah, it's kind of like the complete X-Statix. I was signing with Mike Allred, and we were saying that we should put out like a 6-page story, just so that it's no longer the complete.
Oh, just to be jerks, you mean?
No, just to be amusing art terrorists.
Art terrorists. That's funny. I want more, so you can put out that 6-page story.
Yeah, I wonder if I'd like to do more. I'm not sure if the environment is going to be right now. I mean, obviously all that, and there is still obviously the whole thing of being famous to being famous. I mean, what's interesting is I read through some of that X-Statix. Boy, that stuff hasn't gone away.
No.
I mean, there's even more with the Kardashians, with all these people, with these celebrities I see on TV.
That do absolutely nothing. They don't do anything.
Who I've never heard of.
Yeah.
I know. But in some ways, is that pure celebrity? Like you're disposed with the obligation to be good at something, except be good at celebrity. Maybe that's what a celebrity is. So maybe it's celebrity in its purest form, or maybe it's fucking stupid. I don't know.
Have you seen the Woody Allen movie Celebrity, where he kind of asks those questions?
Well, clearly I haven't.
It's a black and white film that he did in the 90s, and Leonardo DiCaprio's in it as a very young man, and he's kind of a trashy rock star, kind of disillusioned, not really a very good person.
But he's a celebrity.
Yeah, it's called Celebrity, but I love Woody Allen. Everybody I know hates him, but I love him, so I've seen all of his films. But that one's good.
Orson Welles once said to some actor he met, he said, "You'll never be a good actor, but you will be a good star." And it was true. I guess star for them meant celebrity. And there are some actors who are not that good at being an actor. but they're quite good at being stars, I guess.
Right, right. Kind of like I just watched The Crown. That was one television show I bothered to watch.
You know what? I'm really surprised. I mean, this American guy, I know this director said how good it was, and
Hmm.
I said, well, I've got so little interest in the royal family. I
Yeah.
said that basically I'm as interested in the royal family as they are in me. You know, this really is nothing. So I really resisted watching it because I thought, well, I don't give a fuck
Me too.
about her when she was young or about all that. But when I saw it, I just thought it was done so well. And it's
Yeah.
not just about the crown, it's about the crown, what it means, and it's about social mores of that time. And it's just such good TV, I think,
Hmm.
that I've kind of really got into it. Behind it, obviously, I'm late, but it hardly matters because it's still set.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. I just watched it 2 weeks ago while I was sick. I was like, I can't
I
do
think, yeah,
anything.
okay.
And I got really, really into it. And yeah, like you said, like I don't care about the royal family. What does that mean to me? Nothing. But I really liked the parts where they talked about how she dealt with certain situations, especially and things like the church, dealing with things like the church in Britain at the
Well, yeah,
time. And
so it's an interesting relationship. She's the head of the uh, of the Anglican Church, and
hmm
which is kind of bizarre. But the whole thing,
super
look,
weird.
if you give any of it a moment's thought, the whole thing is completely bizarre. I
Yeah.
mean, you were talking about celebrities, famous for being famous, but without any perceivable skills or abilities. You
hmm
keep describing the royal family. I mean,
Yeah.
what they're good at is being the royal family. I mean, take
Yeah.
away, they're good for nothing else.
Yeah. And I mean, I had no idea that the queen didn't know like basic math and stuff. Like I thought that was really interesting. Like she knew basic math, but like her education was a joke, right? So
Yeah.
that's interesting to me. Anyways, we totally gotten off topic.
Because she was obviously, yeah, I guess she was educated to be a queen.
Yeah.
Maybe also that class in Britain might have been really behind the times. It wasn't that long ago that women's education was deemed as very unnecessary because what they were going to be having to do was keep house. If you were that class to be able to look after staff and
hmm
make babies.
And be an entertaining person
Absolutely,
somehow.
yeah. And make babies, yeah.
Yeah. Yay, fun stuff. Good thing that's not really still a thing. It's still kind of a thing, but it's
Well,
less of a thing.
so in Canada, you're almost America, aren't you? Was the whole Harry and Merkel thing? Merkel, the actress.
Yeah.
Is that quite big news?
No. Oh, maybe it is. Not for me. I don't know.
Okay, I'm asking the wrong person. I'm sure.
Maybe, yeah. I think maybe.
Ah.
Just because I think I've seen it on tabloids,
Yeah,
but
she's an American and she's a woman of color. I think it's I mean, it's interesting looking at the crown, looking at the things which were really kind of like shaking the very foundations of the establishment back in the 1950s. How times change, because
yeah.
I guess if it's interesting, the whole crown thing, it's because it's how it acts as a kind of barometer for social change.
Yeah. Exactly. That is really, I think, why the television show is so good, because it is constantly showing this social change. Are you looking at your watch? I have a couple more
I
questions.
was a bit, only because I have a lunch meeting, but
okay.
probably
I will.
your breakfast time yet, because it's so early. So let's get to our question. And Amy, we can always do a part 2 of this next week. That would be fine.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool. Well, let me just ask you one more quick question. I wanted to ask you if we are going to see any familiar characters in this miniseries, like Moira McTaggart and Muir Island, or if that's going to be left out of this Legion story.
You know what? No, and I'm now thinking, oops, perhaps I should have put them in there. But they get a mention. Some of these guys get a mention. Jack Wayne, Muir Island. It gets a mention, so that we know we're in that universe.
Right.
But it's kind of like it's 6 episodes, and I want to be specific rather than be a kind of a universal story about Legion. I want to do a story that's specific about his problem right now, and so I think we see that stuff a bit in the background, but I mean, Moira McTaggart is not one of his personalities. She exists in the real world outside of David Haller.
Right.
And a lot of this story takes place inside the mind of a madman, namely David Haller, because that's where Hannah Jones has to descend. And in some ways, it's a metaphor for what psychologists always have to do with their patients, which is to get inside their head. She has to physically get in, well, not physically, but on some psychological level, she is, in a real sense, inside his head. Mm-hmm. And that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, looks scary.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite fun to be able to. It's interesting, this whole thing about madness, who's mad. I've seen real madness, and it's not entertaining, and it's not fun. It's not wacky and exciting and interesting and creative. It can be just really, really, really depressing. So in some ways, madness is used as a metaphor for a way to explore other aspects of personality and character, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what all these personalities are going to be like your personalities for Legion. Yeah, I'm very excited to see it. But I know you've got to go. So if you do want to do a part 2,
we talked about the Crown probably more than.
Oh, we only talked about the Crown for like 5 minutes. I've got a timer on my recording. So
really, if you want to do a part 2 of this, if you had other questions about another comic, let's do it next week.
Okay, that sounds good.
Messenger me, and we can do it.
Cool, because I did have questions about kids.
I wanted this dentist drawer in my garden. What they're doing in the garden is they're cutting the tiles into certain shapes.
Oh, okay.
Before going in and placing them, hopefully perfectly.
Oh, okay. Dentists. Okay.
Well, it sounds like a dentist. Clearly, it's not a dentist. If it is, I suddenly would descend into the world of David Haller. Right. Okay. Last question.
Oh, yeah. I do have questions about Kid, but we'll save that for next week.
Can we do a Kid next week?
Yeah, let's do that. And the other question I wanted was, did you choose Torres as the artist, or did Marvel choose? How did you guys kind of?
We discussed, and he was put forward as an interesting artist for this story, and I think so. Yeah, I think it was a joint decision. I was happy to have him, because I think he what he has, I think, is what he's good at. I think is drawing a sympathetic character. And you talked about David's innocence. And I think that there is a real innocence in the way that Torres depicts him.
He's kind of dashing too at the same time.
Dashing but innocent. Mm-hmm. It's kind of how I see myself.
That's awesome.
Perhaps not.
Okay, cool. I was just curious because you guys haven't worked together before.
Correct.
Okay, and that's awesome. That's new and exciting.
So there's about finding each other out a little bit. You know, like when you've never worked with an artist and you write a script, there's always that slight disconnect between what you imagine is going to be the case and what is the case. Mm-hmm. And you just have to kind of like find the middle ground where you're happy with what's happening. I think I am happy.
Great, awesome. Yeah,
good.
I'm very happy with it. It's got this modern feel, so that's one thing that I always notice with comics.
I think modern is exactly what we want. Modern for David Haller, anyway. Like not back, and it's a new David Haller for a new century.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Peter, for doing this, and I hope to talk to you next week.
It's been great as usual, and contact me. Let's do this again, and we'll talk about all that other stuff.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, good. Have a good breakfast.
Yes, enjoy the dentist.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.